Okay, so today we're going to do Unit 2, Day 12 notes, which is writing linear equations for word problems. So to begin with, let's write linear equations if we're given the slope and the y-intercept. So number one, write the slope-intercept form equation with a slope of -3 and a y-intercept of 4. Well, we know that the m is -3 and the letter b is 4. So if we were to write my equation, y equals mx plus b, then I know that y equals the m, which is -3x, plus the b, which is 4. Okay, and I will highlight just in case y'all need to identify where I got all my information from. Okay. Now, number two, write a linear equation with the m equals 1/2 and the b equals -6. Once again, the general form of a line is y equals mx plus b, so y equals 1/2 x minus 6, okay? It's very clear. So b is the -6, and the 1/2 is the m. Number three, what is the linear equation of a line with a slope of 0 and the y-intercept of 10? So y equals mx plus b. We know that the m is 0 and the b is 10. So y equals 0x plus 10. Now, you're never going to see 0x. That's just one of those things you don't see. So I can eliminate the 0 and the x and just make it y equals 10, because the 0x goes away. So that's where I got that information from. Now that we know how to write equations using the slope and the y-intercept, we can now write equations from a word problem. Now, two of the most important things we're going to need when we're writing these equations from a word problem are the slope and the y-intercept. Now, when you're dealing with the slope and word problems, you're looking for the number with the word per, every, each, something like that. Something that says every month, every week, per month, per minute. Now, the y-intercept is the easiest. It's your initial value. So your starting point. Okay? So now let's do example number one. A restaurant charges $9.95 for a large cheese pizza and $1.25 for each additional topping. Write an algebraic model for the total cost y of a pizza with s toppings. Okay? Well, let's start by identifying what the x and the y are going to represent. The x, according to our problem, is the toppings. So how many toppings you're going to get on your pizza, that's what x represents. Now the y, according to a problem, is the cost. So based on how many toppings you order will determine how much your pizza is going to cost. Now obviously we need to determine what the y-intercept is, the initial value, the starting point. Well, what's the initial price of a pizza? Well, $9.95. Now, what is the slope? Well, the slope is the number that has the word per, the one that repeats. And if you notice, it will be 125 because it says each additional pizza. That means per topping, or you can say for every topping, but basically your slope is 125. Now that we have identified the y-intercept and the slope, remember the y-intercept is the letter b, the slope is the m. So if you create your equation, it will be 1.25x plus 9.95. And there you go. You have created your equation. Okay, let's do a couple more. So number two, suppose that the water level of a river is 34 feet and that it is receding at a rate of 0.5 feet per day. Write an equation for the water level L after d days. So first thing is first, we need to identify the slope and the letter b. So slope and the y-intercept. So y-intercept, What's the starting point? What was the starting level of this river? 34 feet. And what's the slope? Well, it says 0.5 feet per. There's your keyword, so that tells you your slope, so 0.5. So now, create your equation. Y equals mx plus b. So y equals 0.5x plus 34. And there's your equation that represents this situation. Okay, moving on to the back. When you got your car fixed, the cost for parts was $75. The cost of labor was $45 per hour. Write an algebraic model to represent your total bill Y if they worked on it for X hours. Well, first thing you need to identify is your M and your B. Your B is your y-intercept. So what was the starting point of this fix? So your starting point was $75 because that's what you begin with. Before they could even fix your car, you needed the parts. So your initial cost was, or your initial starting point was $75. Now, your M, of course, is 45 because if you notice, there's the key word. The key word that tells you is the slope. So 45 per means slope. So we have all the necessary information to create our equation. So y equals 45x plus 75 will represent that situation. Now for number 4, you can work that out on your own. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask me in class the next day. So number 5, a plumber charges $25 for a service call plus $50 per hour of service. How much will it cost for 4 hours of service? Well, once again, we need to identify the X and the Y. Even though I haven't been identifying the X and the Y and the other problems, it is something that you should do mentally, so you'll have an idea of what the input is and what the output represents according to the problem. So what does the X, the input, represent in this problem? Well, it represents the hours, okay? Now what does the y-intercept represent? It represents the cost. So based on how long it takes for them to do this job will determine how much it's going to cost you. So now the y-intercept, the initial price. What is the initial price of this service? Well, it's $25. Just to call and tell them that you're going to need something fixed is going to cost $25. After that, it's going to cost you $50 for every hour. And there's your keyword, per, which tells you the y, that is the slope. Now, you have all the information you need, so create your equation. So y equals 50x plus 25. Now, it says, how much will it cost for 4 hours of service? Now that I have my equation, I need to input my hours. So they're telling me that I'm going to need a service of 4 hours. So according to the hours, or according to our parts, it's telling me that the hours is represented by x, so x equals 4. So with that being said, I can take this x value and plug it into my equation. Now if you remember, instead of an x, I will put parentheses. And inside of those parentheses will go my input, my x value. And now, all I have to do is multiply and add to get my final value. So 50 times 4 plus 25 is 225. So what does this tell me? It tells me that for 4 hours of service, it will cost $225. Now, that is one way of doing it. The other way, if you have your calculator and you want to do a little bit quicker, is to use your graphing calculator. So you will go to y equals, clear anything that you have on your screen, and now you're going to type in your equation, 50x plus 25, and instead of clicking graph, click the blue button for second graph. It takes you to the table. Now they told me that we're doing 4 hours of service, so scroll down where it says 4 for the x, and over on the y will give you your output, which is 225, which is exactly the same thing we got, okay? So there's two ways of solving this. You can either do the math yourself by inputting your x or inputting whatever the hours is going to be, and then out comes your answer, your output, the cost. Okay. If you have any further questions on these types of questions, please do not hesitate to ask me tomorrow in class. You can also work out number 6 and number 7 by yourself. Please ask me in class the next day about the assignments that are for this lesson. It's very important that you practice creating equations because it's a very big part of the EOG for the 8th grade standards.